Going on, everyone? Welcome into Wake and Rake, the Week 10 edition, where we go through your lineup questions, help you get set up for all the different matchups that you need to know, and help you win your season long, as well as whatever DFS contests you are entering for today. My name is Ben Heisler. I am joined each and every week by my good friend Justin Fensterman. He, of course, of SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio and FantasyAlarm.com. Fensty! What's going on, pal?
Dude, I am writing my Christmas list early, but not of gifts, of quarterbacks that are starting in these games, Ben. There are a lot of injuries here, and this has just been to keep myself in the game and in check so I don't make any mistakes when giving any analysis for today. Ben, I've written a laundry list of quarterbacks that are starting today, including the most recent news, which we touched on earlier, and that's that Matthew Stafford will be out.
Well, we've already gotten a couple questions in, and of course, we'll take all of your questions over the course of the show. You can send them to us right here on Periscope. We're also are live streaming on YouTube Live and on Facebook and LinkedIn as well. The LinkedIn people are now getting a chance to enjoy this high-quality show on Sunday mornings. We will be with you up until 11:30 a.m. East Coast time. That is 10:30 a.m. Central time. All right, so you brought up the different quarterbacks. Let's start with Matthew Stafford, him missing this game for the first time since 2011. Jeff Driscoll now taking his place, and we already got a question saying, well, how does that impact, if I have Kenny Golladay in my lineup? I also have Ty Johnson. What should I do? I think everybody here, Fensty, takes a massive step in the wrong direction for the Lions because Stafford was completing passes downfield. He was getting the ball out quick. Marvin Jones, Kenny Golladay were having resurgent years. TJ Hawkinson continues to get involved in the offense. And now dealing with the running game, Jeff Driscoll is more mobile than Matthew Stafford, so he's going to take some chances and opportunities away from some of the guys in J.D. McKissick and Ty Johnson and the rest of the Lions' backfield. So I feel like everybody in this matchup takes a massive step back, and it's a disappointment because it was a really good matchup for the Lions against the Bears team that has been fleeting over the last 4 weeks.
No, absolutely, Ben. And the thing is, you have to view this differently from season long and DFS. From the DFS side of it, you can't really put that confidence, that vote of confidence in anyone from the Lions side at this point. But for season long, with as many teams as they have, 6 teams on bye, and all of a sudden 2 that are already done from the Thursday game itself as well, Ben, it's one of those situations where are we really comfortable telling people to bench Kenny Golladay today?
I think it's all dependent on who else you have. Like, if we're talking about DFS, I think even he's not a good contrarian play at this point. The Bears' defense is still talented, and they've given up some points, but I think a large product of it has been because of the inconsistencies on the offensive side, right? Like, they've even shown you in games, certainly against New Orleans, I think was the clear-cut example, and even against Philadelphia towards the end of the first half. When Mitch Trubisky is not completing any sort of passes whatsoever, when he's missing wide-open guys down the field, when the Bears' offense is doing everything to just put the defense back out there so that they get gassed in the first half, why would they continue to put up that type of an effort? Prince Amukamara has been dealing with a little bit of injuries, but for the most part, he's had a good season. Then you have Kyle Fuller on the other side that's also been fairly impressive. That's the guy that the Bears brought back. Like, the Bears' corner situation is still a very good one. They still have Eddie Jackson in the secondary, and like they can still shut teams down if they want to. And so even with this matchup against a really talented wide receiver in Golladay, and same thing with Marvin Jones, a lot of it needs to be dependent on the quarterback getting him the football, and I just don't trust Jeff Driscoll to do that on a consistent basis this week.
Yeah, and I've been tracking this line, too, to see how Vegas is responding to Stafford being out. I mean, a lot of people thought that he would still do whatever it takes to not end his starting streak, Ben, which was over 130. Now the line down to 39, lowest of the day. And that's gone down 2.5 points in the last hour, Ben.
Wow, yeah. I mean, it's been serious. And again, it's not because of Mitch Trubisky. He's still playing in this game in a fantastic matchup. Like, if you're playing, say, on DraftKings, and you're just taking, like, all right, I want to throw in a dollar single entry lineup against 30,000 people, you can make an argument that maybe Trubisky with Allen Robinson or Trubisky and Taylor Gabriel might be an intriguing play and a good leverage play, Fensty, because David Montgomery is going to be a cash game lock running back today. The last 2 weeks, he's gotten plenty of volume. I know only 14 carries against Philadelphia, but they were down for most of the game, but he's still gotten into the end zone twice. And the Bears have started to figure out that they know that they need David Montgomery out of the I formation where he's going to break tackles and be able to get a second boost to the end zone. And that's their best chance of scoring right now. It's not through the pass with Mitchell Trubisky.
I hope Matt Nagy is watching Wake and Rake right now, Ben.
Oh, wouldn't that be great?
He needs to. He needs us. That's what it comes down to. Utilize Montgomery. But you mentioned a good point here. This is the type of week with the quarterback injuries where you can stack for cheap when it comes to even the Colts if you really want to get messy and cute. But you just mentioned the Bears here, and I'm seeing Mitch Trubisky at 5,100 already instead of paying over 7,000 for quarterbacks on DraftKings. Why not go after that if you're putting in a cheap lineup with that? Ben, that's something I'm willing to do today with the injuries.
I think that's perfectly reasonable. And remember, from weeks 4 through 10, Mitchell Trubisky, not Pat Mahomes, was the number 1 scoring fantasy quarterback in the NFL last year. Number 1. Part of the reason why was because he had that 6-touchdown game against Tampa Bay, but he was also running and in using his athleticism to pick up yards. And he finally made that type of play a week or so ago against Philadelphia. And there's times where we're just waiting for Trubisky to start running again. Like, why not use that to his advantage if he can escape pressure? And he's been taking some bad sacks. You know what, Fensty? And we're getting some questions, so we'll get to you guys in just a second. Seth is always checking in. Joey is checking in. We'll get to him. P. DeSantis 25 is back on with us on Periscope. I feel like Mitch Trubisky takes things way too literally. You can't be sarcastic with him because he's still going to take it. So, like Matt Nagy a couple weeks ago said, blinders and earmuffs. We got to tune everything out. We got to do us against the world. And yeah, it sounded kind of lame for a team that had high expectations, but whatever, it's coach speak. And then Mitch Trubisky this week to the media says, I'm trying to get the TVs shut off in Hallis Hall so I don't have to hear about people criticizing us. And so I'm thinking to myself, you're the starting quarterback of this team. You need to be able to have some element of keeping things together to block it out without announcing to the media that you have to block it out. It just shows a complete lack of leadership and not being able to move forward in this type of situation. So I think he has a matchup that suits him very well. I just don't know where his confidence is at to the point where I could feel comfortable enough to start him, especially in something where I'm not just taking a random dart throw to try and leverage the field here.
Right, and that's why, Ben, maybe you take someone with a little bit more experience and veteran experience in Brian Hoyer if you want a cheap stack. What if you stack, let's just say this, if we really want to get messy and be different in tournaments today, what about a Hoyer Pascal mini stack? With you have no T.Y. Hilton to deal with at this point.
Right.
It's a solid matchup. Driscoll, we're worried about reps and everything like that, but with Hoyer, that veteranship that he has right there, he's got the natural reps. So with that already, it's just, I feel like a little bit more comfortable in that situation. We were just talking about Trubisky not being able to handle the media side of it. Hoyer can do that. We've seen it.
He's fine. Yeah, and they have a really smart coaching staff in Frank Wright. Zach Pascal last week had 6 targets, 5 catches for 76 yards and a touchdown. He is priced up to 5,300 this week against a terrible Miami secondary. Well, let me ask you this. Normally when we like to target stacks, there's somebody that we want to run it back with. Are you looking at Devontae Parker without Preston Williams this week as a guy to run it back with? Maybe Mike Gesicki after getting targeted 20 times in the past 4 weeks? Where do you go on the other side, if at all?
I mean, again, and you mentioned this last week, Ben, that Parker was, we actually were very much on the Dolphins. Now Williams is hurt. We were very much, because we said, what dart throws can we take in that Jet game? You said Parker, I said Williams. We both won in that regard. Again, the targets have been there for Parker, so if there's anyone I'm going to trust on that side, it's got to be him with no Williams.
I think that's perfectly reasonable. And, Gesicki, again, the targets have been there, but it's just a question of whether or not the Colts defense can step up and whether or not it might be a garbage time opportunity for him. He's super athletic, and he has a lot of skills, but, he just hasn't completely translated, on the pass catching side just yet. Let's get to a couple of your guys' questions. Like I said, we have some coming in from P. DeSantis 25, from Joey, a couple more coming in. It's Rye just threw out a question over on YouTube Live. So let's start with Seth. And Joey, of course, is checking, and we'll get to Joey next. Half-point PPR between Christian Kirk, Michael Gallup, and DJ Moore. So Christian Kirk with a fantastic matchup. Arizona is on the road at Tampa Bay today. Michael Gallup in the Sunday night game for the Cowboys. They are hosting Minnesota. And DJ Moore on the road against the Green Bay Packers. So half-point PPR, Fensty, we got to decide between Christian Kirk, Michael Gallup, and DJ Moore. First glance, where do you think you're heading on this one?
First glance, I'm heading Christian Kirk. Again, matchup speaks for itself, and this is a way where we're going to chase the points versus Tampa. It's very easy to do. And that's, again, it's a safe option at this point with Gallup. Cooper's expected to play, so that takes away a little bit there. So, again, DJ Moore, man, it's been hard for me to figure out Carolina when it comes to the receiving weapons this year, Ben. And, again, I haven't had that much success personally, but with Kirk here, healthy again, I'm going here chasing the points.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. It's just such an advantageous matchup. And it's not to say that Michael Gallup can't burn Xavier Rhodes deep or
Right.
whoever's on the other side of Minnesota. I think Trey Waynes might be the other might be the other corner there. He's fine, but again, the volume just tends to go up and down for Michael Gallup. And DJ Moore, if anybody, I probably prefer Curtis Samuel on the outside for Carolina in taking some chances this week against Green Bay secondary. DJ Moore, again, probably the safest play, would you say, out of all those guys? Christian Kirk, maybe the highest upside play?
Yes, but in this one, we're going to definitely chase the points here. I think we're on the same page.
For what it's worth, though, in the last 4 weeks, DJ Moore has had 37 targets. 37. Now, he hasn't gotten in the end zone since the 22nd of September, where he only had 1 catch against Arizona. So DJ Moore has some positive touchdown regression coming. So again, against Green Bay in the middle of the field, it's a good matchup, but I do think Christian Kirk is likely going to be the higher upside play, Seth, and the guy that we prefer. One other one coming in from Seth Fensty. It says, I have a gross tight end question. I had Evan Ingram. Do I go with Gesicki, Eric Ebron, or Jonnu Smith to stream? To me, I really like the matchup for Jonnu Smith in the middle of the field against Kansas City. They've already struggled. They've funneled their defense a little bit towards the middle of the field, and Ryan Tannehill is taking more shots downfield as well. But the Chiefs' pass defense, Fensty, has sneakily been like a top 5 DVOA pass defense, but that's more so on the outside. And I think if you're a tight end like Jonnu Smith, who's got super athletic abilities, take advantage of some of those matchups in the middle of the field, I think Jonnu Smith could get in the end zone today.
I mean, and fewer targets to worry about when it comes to the receiving weapons because Corey Davis may not play. He's tagged as doubtful right now, Ben. We already know Delaney Walker is out. And you have to think of it like this. With Mahomes back in, Titans are going to need to throw a lot today.
Right.
So maybe I'm not saying they're going to rely totally less on Derrick Henry, but at the same time, you have to expect Tannehill to be using his arm a little bit more when chasing down the Chiefs.
Right, and especially with Patrick Mahomes back into the mix. And listen, I think everybody had anticipated that Mahomes would likely play. I don't agree with it. I just want to go on the record of saying that I think they should have waited to play Patrick Mahomes until after the bye. This is the franchise quarterback, and I'm sure that Andy Reid and the medical staff have gone to every possible scenario to say, is this guy going to get much more seriously hurt on that dislocated knee? Could this end up being a season-ending injury if he tweaks it at all? They must have said no, because coming back against Tennessee and then having to play the game in Mexico City, where the turf is arguably the worst in the NFL by a mile, you're just putting your star franchise quarterback out in danger, and I just don't feel like the Chiefs need to put themselves in that situation. They currently have a nice lead in the division. I initially thought maybe they'd have to worry about the Chargers, but the Chargers couldn't beat the Raiders on Thursday night. Oakland's been a good team, but Kansas City already has 1 win over them, and that was on the road in Oakland. So the way that I saw it is go win your division, make sure Mahomes is 100% ready for the postseason, and then you can move forward, start him after that bye week in Week 13. And they just don't seem that that's the direction that they want to go in, and that's surprising to me.
And the Titans' defense, it's not the best in the league. We're not talking about them like
they've been very good against the run, but they've struggled against the pass.
Right. But I'm looking at total yards that they have allowed when it comes to passing. They're right there at that midway point. So they're not, there are teams that we can target against every single week. We talked about especially teams like, let's just say, Arizona. But, when looking at this Titans team, they're not the worst defensively, which makes me wonder, Ben, why bring him back in a non-totally juicy, sexy matchup? I agree with what you're saying here.
Unless they feel like this is the confidence booster that he needs to get himself going, go up against Tennessee's struggling pass defense with no Malcolm Butler and a banged-up Adoree Jackson, and say to yourself, okay, this is what we need to go ahead and get you comfortable. But it's Pat Mahomes, man. He doesn't need that. He's Pat friggin' Mahomes. So, if anything, get him rested, get him feeling 100% or as close to 100% as possible. And listen, I'm not a doctor. Maybe the Chiefs staff has determined that it can't get worse from this point forward. So, if that's the point, then go ahead and get him back on the field. But I just don't think they need him to beat Tennessee. I don't think they need him to beat the Chargers at this point.
I wonder how season-long fantasy players, and if this were a straight-up talk show, we could do an entire 2 hours on this, how fantasy owners of Mahomes who invested as much as they did in Mahomes, whether you traded for him or drafted for him. How do you feel at this point? Because you're thinking fantasy playoffs at this point. Are you that desperate that you haven't found a successful streaming option that you need him back? Or do you actually want him rested so that he'll be totally active and not have to maybe worry as much about him getting hurt before the fantasy playoffs?
If I'm a season-long owner, Fensty, and I took Mahomes, more than likely I probably reached for him because of where he was going in drafts. Like,
Right.
Listen, especially being in the Kansas City area, man, I know people that took him 1-1 when he shouldn't have been.
Come on.
Listen,
What?
it's location bias. That's what it is. It's location bias. So people wanted Mahomes on their team, and you never chase after a quarterback who's the quarterback one, let alone in the first or the second round. Maybe you can make an argument for the third. I'd like Deshaun Watson at the beginning of the season more than Pat Mahomes, but I certainly didn't think about Lamar Jackson or anybody else along those lines too. So listen, if you're a season-long owner, you just want Mahomes to come back by any means necessary. They're not thinking about the playoffs. Just get me my quarterback that I took super early in the draft, and then move on. Our buddy Joey checks in over on YouTube Live. Say, guys, so now that George Kittle is out, do I pick up T.J. Hawkinson, Greg Olsen, or Jared Cook for today? I would say initially if Stafford was playing, T.J. Hawkinson would be in a solid spot, but I don't trust him with Jeff Driscoll. Greg Olsen's got an intriguing matchup on the road against Green Bay, a place that he's played many times before back during his time with the Chicago Bears and also with Carolina. And then Jared Cook probably is the best matchup out of anybody going up against Atlanta at home. He's also caught touchdowns in the last 2 games that he's played, but the target share, Fensty, is not ideal for Jared Cook. He had 6 targets and then 3 targets the last 2 games. So the 6 were positive, and both of them ended up turning into touchdowns. But, do you go with Jared Cook because the matchup is best? Or maybe do you look at Jonnu Smith if he's still available on the waiver wire? Who would you pick up for a streaming tight end for Joey today?
I mean, yes, regarding Jonnu Smith, I have been on in the last few weeks, so yes. But the problem is something you just mentioned. The targets for Greg Olsen have been very inconsistent, and as someone who owns Greg Olsen, it's not been a fun year. It's been that roller coaster that you don't like to be on for most of the year, Ben. So with that, I mean, looking at the other side, it's very hard for me to rely on Greg Olsen right now, even for a stream.
I'm with you there, too. I just feel like if you're going to go for a matchup base, you probably got to go Jared Cook. If Jonnu Smith, Joey, if you're watching this still, if Jonnu Smith is still available, I feel like that's the better play. Right?
I mean, I think so. I mean, again, with Cook, you always want to attack Atlanta. That's big. But again, you want someone that's getting consistent targets. And again, something with the Titans that we have to keep talking about with Patrick Mahomes back in, they are going to have to throw today. And again, it's not looking like we're going to have Corey Davis already out Delaney Walker.
Right.
As we continue through the show, I'm starting to want to build a lineup and put Tannehill in there.
Oh, no, you don't want to do that.
Trust me.
You don't want to do that.
I want to, but it's going to be a lot of breeze for me in daily.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. And Pete DeSantis, we'll get to your question coming up in just a second. We also have one from It's Rye RYH, Mr. Sports Take, Notorious TBG. Our buddy Nathan is checking in, PD Dubs. Our buddy Mark the Buzz. Plenty of questions coming in, Fensty, so I promise we will get to all of you. You brought up Drew Brees. I assume you're looking at him as your cash game quarterback today, correct?
I'm looking at him for everything.
Everything. Okay.
Yes.
And there's plenty of good reasons for that. Drew Brees is at home. He gets to go up against one of the worst defenses, both against stopping the run and stopping the pass in the NFL. Here's my concern. You can tell me whether or not I'm overthinking this. Just, it's Drew Brees at home against Atlanta, where he's typically dominated in the past. Don't overthink it. The Saints are 13-point favorites in a division game at home. They now have shown that Latavius Murray in the last 2 games that he started over Alvin Kamara that he can carry the load. So, do you have any concern that if the Saints get off to a pretty big lead, that Drew Brees doesn't go for over 300 yards, that he's not throwing for multiple touchdowns, that they allow it to be an Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray-led run-dominant game against Atlanta, who can't stop anybody, and then maybe they turn the ball over a couple times and trying to come back, and then the Saints just keep running the ball. Sean Payton has shown that he doesn't mind that philosophy, and I just worry about the ceiling for Drew Brees, even in the most ideal matchup, because of how bad Atlanta's defense has been. Am I overthinking it?
A little bit. you make a decent point there because with having two effective backs, they're going to, because Kamara's fully healthy. So with that, you have a good point there, Ben. But at the same time, I think that Drew Brees can get most of his in that time in the first half. With Matt Ryan playing as well, it makes me a little bit more comfortable. No disrespect to Shaw or anything like that. But again, that makes me think that this is going to be somewhat competitive. And again, every time I want to think the way you're thinking, Ben, and I don't attack Atlanta, I end up regretting it. So if I'm going to go into this with regrets afterwards, it's going to be riding one of the successful quarterbacks and one of the most successful matchups he's going to have this year.
For what it's worth, and again, maybe this is part of the reason that I was overthinking it, in Drew Brees' last 4 full games, not talking about the game against the Rams, in his last 4 full games, all have been in 2019, he has thrown the ball no less than 38 times in those games. In those games, he had 301 yards against the Eagles, 249 against the Rams, 370 against Houston. I'm sorry, no, I was screwed up. They were in 2019, but a couple of those games were playoff games. Regardless, that first game against Houston, 370 yards, threw the ball 43 times. And then the games against Arizona also threw the ball 43 times. So it actually benefits the stats that he hadn't played. Multiple touchdowns in the game against Arizona, and had 2 touchdowns in the game against the Texans as well. So maybe you're right. Maybe with Drew Brees back, it's full systems go. They don't need to run. They're going to chuck the ball downfield. Michael Thomas is going to eat. He's a cash game lock today. We talked about David Montgomery a little bit earlier. Michael Thomas is in a fantastic spot. I think you have to play him in cash game lineup. So you're right. Maybe Drew Brees. And again, the price tag is fair at only $6,700 today. I think that's perfectly reasonable.
You know what, Ben, and it's one of those situations where if I'm going down based off your theory, which, look, it's astute. You have to think of it like that if the Saints are that good that they're just going to handle it with Murray. You're 100% right. But if I'm going down swinging, it's in the matchup like this.
Right.
This has been all week, even before looking at price points. As soon as I saw Atlanta was on that schedule when looking at Week 10, which I do the overview on Monday, looking at the first glimpse at the next week, that's something that I've just been on all week, and this is a situation where if I go down, I'm going down swinging.
Perfectly reasonable. From P. DeSantis 25, who checks in on Periscope today, says, I am not feeling Mark Andrews this week. Would you start Rudolph over him with Thielen out? No. I'm not sure why you're not feeling Mark Andrews. I know that he's dropped some passes, and he tends to be a little bit frustrating. But Mark Andrews gets volume. He's the most targeted player in this offense from Lamar Jackson. It's such a good matchup against Cincinnati. And Kyle Rudolph might have 3 targets total on the year. And I say that tongue-in-cheek, but what has Kyle Rudolph showed you that would make you a believer in playing him today? Like, Fensty, have you seen anything from Kyle Rudolph that suggests he's a better player over Mark Andrews?
No, it's almost like I want to say it's almost luck and right place, right time for him. But we've been at this with Kyle Rudolph for the last few years now. No matter who's been under center, with Kyle Rudolph, you want to think he's that even keel tight end that you could get. But again, just not impressive enough for me. And then what happens, Ben? I see this so much. He scores a touchdown, and then there's the.
That's what it is. People are chasing touchdowns, and that's the one thing that you cannot
I'd
do.
rather you at this point, if you're looking at value, I'd rather you spend up for Diggs at that point.
Oh, I completely agree. Yes. No, there's no doubt about it, but I think what you have to ultimately be able to do is say to yourself, all right, do I want the guy that's going to see more targets? And Kyle Rudolph, granted, has seen more targets in the past 3 weeks. 6 against the Lions, 3 against Washington, 5 against Kansas City, and in 2 of those 3 games he's caught a touchdown. But his max is 58 yards on the year. Like, that's just not something that I feel secure about. Versus Mark Andrews, I know that last week I think he only had 3 or 4 targets, as I pull up his game log now. Right. Yeah, that's substantial here. Right. Did it against the Patriots last week, but the previous, okay, if P. DeSantis is still watching, Mark Andrews up until last week has had no less than 7 targets all season long. Okay? So the fact that you're going away from it, he didn't play that many snaps against the Patriots, it's a mistake not to play Mark Andrews. Like, if Kyle Rudolph goes and outscores Mark Andrews, I'm not going to pie myself in the face. Which I didn't have to last week. We can get to the FF pie bet a little bit later. But next week I will full on admit that I screwed up and that you should have played. Actually, no, I'm not going to say that. Mark Andrews is the better play. even if Kyle Rudolph scores a touchdown, Mark Andrews is the better play today. Do not play Kyle Rudolph even with Adam Thielen out. There is my answer.
There you go. That's it's again, we don't want, you talk about overthinking. We don't want to chase too much, Ben.
Correct.
And especially when you're tight end, we get it. It's coming off of a poor matchup against a defensively sound monster in the Patriots.
Yeah, they've been amazing.
You can't let that cloud your judgment and start chasing.
From It's Right, and then I see questions again from Mr. Sports Take, from Nathan, PD Dubs, Mark of the Buzz, Rock, KC64, Corey in Winnipeg. There's a bunch of questions we have to get to. So, Fensty, we'll go a little bit more rapid fire to try and get all of those questions in. Thank you guys for joining us here on Wake and Rake. We'll be with you until the bottom of the hour, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, 10:30 a.m. Central Time. From It's Right, RYH. So I don't know if it's pronounced Rye or Re or whatever it is, but toss up Fensty at the flex spot between Kenyon Drake or Curtis Samuel today.
Ooh, I'm going to have to go with Samuel.
Me too.
Again, with just now David Johnson back, I'm starting him, Ben, in our league, Drake, as a desperation. But this is a league with 14 teams and 3 flexes.
Yeah.
So this is like, I view it now as a desperation start. I don't know if there's going to be this whole Johnson's going to get this carries until they hit the 10 yards, then you're going to give it to Drake. I need to be a spectator. And then once Edmonds, it's with that situation, once he comes back, he's out. That's going to convolute it even more. I am going to go with Curtis Samuel because of less of the share.
Listen, I was an advocate of trading Kenyon Drake after that monster performance last week. That's the ultimate sell high opportunity for him. And hopefully some of you guys were listening. I think what happens this week, though, again, this is my philosophy, and you can tell me whether or not you think I'm nuts on this, but I love David Johnson in this matchup. And it's not because of the matchup against Tampa Bay on the running side. The Buccaneers have been a terrific team at stopping the run all season long. They've been top 5 in DVOA, probably top 3. I think they're going to use David Johnson more in the slot. I think they're going to use him primarily as a pass catcher. They're going to give Kenyon Drake opportunities in the running game. David Johnson now gets to go from facing a top 5 defense against the run to a bottom 5 defense against the pass. So based on what his volume has been over the last several weeks that he's been healthy, as I go ahead and get his game log up, because David Johnson has put up really impressive numbers in the passing game for this offense. It's taking a little bit of time to load, but let me go ahead and
I've got
get
it right
this
here,
number.
Ben.
You got it. Okay.
Right here. Let's go back to let's chart this a little bit. Let's go back to week 6 here. I'm seeing 8 targets, 6 receptions, 68 yards.
Yep.
3 receptions in week 5. So we just talked about Mark Andrews. So against Cincinnati, the same team that Andrews is facing, Johnson actually had 3 receptions for 65 yards on 5 targets.
Yep.
So you can get yards. Seattle, he faced Seattle week 4. That was 8 receptions for 99 yards. Okay, and then against Carolina week 3, only 6 receptions, which is good from the point value, only for 28 yards, but he scored that week.
He has 23 catches in the last 4 games with 2 touchdowns through the air to go along with 33 targets for a running back in the passing game, going up against one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL. Like, David Johnson Fensty is a guy that I want exposure to in tournaments today on DraftKings.
Do you think people are just going to view him as the running back that he is and not think of that side of it?
I mean, I think people...
You think ownership's going to be low? Being that the price point is so low on DraftKings, Ben, I will ride that train with you today.
I just don't... Maybe the ownership will be high. Like right now, I'm looking at Fantasy Labs, and they project the ownership for David Johnson to be between 31 and 40%. I don't see... Or I'm sorry, I'm looking at David Montgomery. David Montgomery is right next to him. Yes, I agree with that ownership for David Montgomery. For David Johnson, they're anticipating 9 to 12%. I think that's probably fair. Maybe a little bit more, just because I think there's some sharp players out there. And listen, maybe there's sharp players that say, you know what? Yeah, the matchup is really good, even if he's used as a pass catcher, but I can get David Montgomery. I can get Devin Singletary for right around the same price point. I can spend up a little bit more and get somebody like Derrick Henry this week against Kansas City. Nick Chubb, Aaron Jones are in the 7,000 range. Like, there's a lot of good running backs this week. CMC is... People are still going to pay for CMC, even though he's $10,500. Saquon Barkley gets a great matchup against the Jets, and he's less than $9K. Dalvin Cook back in play in the Sunday night game. So, Maybe David Johnson gets a bunch of ownership. Maybe he doesn't. But he's a guy for sure in tournaments that I want exposure to today.
Right, Ben. I'll just say this, too, because of what we've seen, and this is the journalism point of view for me being a journalist, you're a journalist, is that if I'm putting David Johnson in lineups, I'm not only making sure I submit those lineups early, I am going to watch the Cardinals' Twitter like a hawk to see if I can get any indication that this guy's only going to be used in emergency game situations so we don't run into past issues. That's how paranoid I am. But you sometimes have to fight through that paranoia for price point here. And again, I think more people, Ben, are trying to figure out how to handle the tight end spot in this matchup than David Johnson.
That's a really good point, because what is O.J. Howard this week? I think Cameron Braid is out for today's game.
Looking at the price point for Howard on DraftKings, he's $3,300.
And Cameron Braid put up a 0 last week.
Cameron Braid is not out. He's $3,700.
Oh, you're right. So Braid is more expensive than Howard.
We're sitting here in this matchup where it's been successful at attacking Arizona for when it comes to tight ends.
No doubt.
Now you've got two with a totally, maybe the most untrustworthy player in fantasy this year with O.J. Howard. Is this a situation, Ben, where you're not going to deal with it at all?
I mean, who would you rather have ownership on? And again, I guess for tournaments, O.J. Howard's going to be between 3 and 5% ownership. Would you rather have O.J. Howard at 3,300 or Jonnu Smith for 3,500 or Greg Olsen for 3,600?
You know what, Ben? I may have to go with the ladders that you just mentioned.
I like Jonnu Smith far more. I just feel like the volume will still be there, and I don't think the ownership will be massive. Like I think you can gain leverage. Like if we're playing Tampa Bay, Arizona, and again, I know you guys have a lot of questions. We will get to all of your questions. If you submitted one, we will get to you.
This is important.
It's very important. We got to sort this shit through. So if you're looking at actual leverage spots, like yes, I suppose by going to O.J. Howard instead of Mike Evans or Chris Godwin is fine. But now you have Ronald Jones as the unquestioned starter. Ronald Jones this week is a great value play in daily this week. I think he's coming in at, what, 4,600?
4,300 on DraftKings.
4,300 for Ronald Jones. You have to play him this week. I mean, that's just too good of a value against a terrible Arizona run defense. Let's look at Ronald Jones last week for him. I believe he had 18 carries.
He did.
67 yards and a touchdown. So, and he might get a little bit of pass game. He's had 5 targets in the passing game the last 2 weeks. 4,300, like, this feels like Jalen Samuels from last week, where you just you got to go ahead and plug this guy in. So, like, cash game lineups, I'm probably starting with some combination of Christian McCaffrey, David Montgomery, and Ronald Jones.
Perfect.
Throw Michael Thomas in there and then try and figure out the rest.
Yes, or we could go with your David Johnson theory for today, too, which I'm starting to really want to buy in on.
Yeah, but I don't think I can play him in cash, Fensty.
Right.
Even at that price point, I think he's a GPP-only option for me. Nathan's checking in. Derrick Henry or roll the dice with David Johnson again? So let me bring up, I got to show some love to my buddy Derek Brown, who wrote a great article over at thequantedge.com, and I have to find the numbers here because it's pretty fascinating to see that the difference that the Chiefs' defense has made in the last 3 weeks, because teams weeks 2 through 7 would just flat out run all over Kansas City. They were terrible at stopping the run. The last 3 weeks they've been really good. He says over the past 3 weeks, the Kansas City Chiefs' run defense has given up a total of 80.3 rushing yards per game, 3.65 yards per carry to opposing running backs. This is a massive departure from weeks 2 through 6, when the Chiefs allowed 149 rushing yards per game and 5.29 yards per carry. So we've gone from 149 yards a game, Fensty, down to 80. So a difference of about 50, or can't do math, difference of about 70 rushing yards per game. And helping because of that is with Chris Jones. And then Mike Pennell coming into the defense in week 8 has made a substantial defense. So even though Derrick Henry looks like he's in a really good matchup, this could be a struggle for him. So I would probably go with David Johnson and just hope that he's going to get full snaps as opposed to Derrick Henry this week. Henry might be a little bit safer. Maybe he gets into the end zone. But I really like David Johnson. I prefer him.
Again, you've really done a good job this show convincing me regarding David Johnson. But something I got to just bring up that you said, Whereas we can rely on Derrick Henry for those rushing yards, we're chasing receptions when it comes to David Johnson. So when it comes to safety, that doesn't fare well for David Johnson here. Again, when we're talking for DFS, we're chasing receptions, it's fine. When we're talking season long and rushing, and that sides with Henry.
Yeah, I think that's true. And again, considering the volume that Derrick Henry has had consistently over the last few weeks, he's going to get the red zone carries. We just don't know who that's going to be for Arizona. Henry's the safer play. I think we can all agree on that, but I think I'd rather chase the points with David Johnson in this particular matchup, considering how much better Kansas City has been against the run. And remember what we talked about with Ryan Tannehill, Fensty. They're going to need to throw to be able to keep up with Kansas City today. So maybe it's a 15-carry, 50-yard game for Derrick Henry, and maybe he sneaks into the end zone. We don't know.
I'd be very, very satisfied with that.
So there you go. From Mr. Sports Take on Periscope, better low-end buy flex option. Cole Beasley, Alex Erickson, or Auden Tate. And it's a PPR league.
Right.
I really don't want anything to do with any Bengal not named Tyler Boyd right now.
I'm with you.
Ryan Finley's now the new quarterback. He's replacing Andy Dalton. And listen, maybe Auden Tate goes off today. Maybe Alex Erickson catches 10 balls, but I'd be surprised. The more consistent option week in and week out is going to be Cole Beasley in the middle of that Buffalo Bills offense.
Yeah, he scored the last 3 weeks, too. I don't like seeing on 2 targets, though, from week 9. I don't like seeing that. But the fact of the matter is he got it where it counts, and that's in the end zone. So, again, we're chasing too much with the other Bengals players. I'm going to have to stick with Beasley here.
Okay. From Notorious TBG on YouTube Live, do you go with A.J. Brown for Tennessee against Kansas City or Tyler Boyd against the Ravens? From a matchup standpoint, A.J. Brown has the advantage, but Tyler Boyd is going to be that constant floor option for most teams each and every week. I feel like in this particular situation, I probably got to go with Tyler Boyd here just because I know that he's going to get consistent volume today.
They're also averaging in a lot of his games this year over 10 yards per catch as well. Will help you and bring up those points, even though we don't know what to expect from the Cincy offense now, the new quarterback and everything with Finley there. So again, with Tyler Boyd, the targets are safe, the yardage is safe for me. So like you just said, if there's someone that you can trust there, it's not going to be Erickson, it's going to be Boyd.
Yeah, Tyler Boyd's lowest target on the year was 6 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's at 6. Other than that, he's had 11, 10, 11, 6, 14, 7, 14, and 9 targets. Only has 1 touchdown, but again, I think it's more of a byproduct of Andy Dalton, a bad offensive line. Cincinnati still remaining without a win this year. Can he do it against Baltimore? Certainly. It depends whether or not they're keeping him on the inside or the outside and where they're going to move him around, but I know he's going to get volume in that offense. So, and I also think this too, Fensty, if you're looking for, if we're talking a little bit of wagering as well, very curious as to Cincinnati and what their line is in the first half, because Baltimore, divisional game, coming off against a huge home win on Sunday night against New England, kind of feels like maybe the first half could be a bit of a letdown spot for them this week.
Oh, yeah. Clock management's going to be big in this game. Looking at the total for the entire game being at 44 right now. Again, when it comes to this game, it's very hard to trust what the Bengals can bring. Again, with essentially not a new offense, but having a new quarterback there. I want to be a spectator. That's why I'm not giving anyone for daily. But like we just said in this game, if there's someone that you could trust because of the targets and the yardage, it is Tyler Boyd. But, looking on the other side of this game as well, wondering if you could put a lot of that trust. We mentioned a lot of running backs, Ben. Mark Ingram. What kind of trust do you have in him today?
I actually think he's a fantastic tournament play today. And part of the reason is that, with Lamar Jackson, his best games usually come when the team needs Lamar Jackson to do everything and anything to be able to win. They don't need Lamar Jackson to be great against Cincinnati today. They can just give the rock to Mark Ingram 15 to 20 times. I could see him getting 2 to 3 touchdowns. I could see him getting over 100 yards just because Cincinnati can't stop anybody in the running game. Mm-hmm. And if you're Baltimore, why put your star quarterback at risk when you know that you can just do a regular, standard running game, dominant game on the road against Cincinnati, who hasn't been able to stop anybody all year? I feel like this is a great week for Mark Ingram. Gus Edwards might vulture a touchdown away. It's part of the reason that I'm fading Lamar Jackson today, that I just feel like they don't need him to be electric and magnificent to win. Now, that could completely blow up in my face because there's the times that I faded Lamar Jackson before, have been in tough matchups. But I've seen now in tough matchups, he rises to the occasion. He runs for over 100 yards. He completes some deep touchdown passes. So I look at Lamar Jackson saying the floor is always going to be there, but I just would rather think in this situation, the Baltimore Ravens would rather give the ball to their best running backs and be able to protect them a little bit.
You would think so, Ben, but then that vulture factor comes into play. But again,
no doubt,
this is an incredible matchup, almost 178 yards on the ground that they give up per game. I mean, you even look at bad teams like the Dolphins, that's over 20 yards more. It's just incredible how you've been able to run on this team all year.
From our buddy PD Dubs, who checks in on YouTube, do you go with Dak Prescott or Josh Allen this week? Josh Allen on the road to Cleveland. Very surprising to see Buffalo as underdogs on the road, despite how much better of a team they've been all season. Cleveland entering this game with only 2 wins is still 2.5-point home favorites, which makes you wonder whether or not Vegas knows something that we don't. Or Dak Prescott at home against Minnesota, a team that does have a very good defense, but has also struggled on the road. I would tell you that Dak Prescott would probably be my pick for this week. I know that the Cowboys offense tends to go in waves, Fensty, and Dak Prescott will throw for 3 touchdowns and 330 yards one week and then 175 yards, maybe a touchdown the next week. But I feel like the better matchup here is for Dak Prescott.
I do too. Especially again with Amari Cooper. Now we're seeing that he's going to be playing. Right now expected to play high total as well. Even with Thielen out, says something to me too. So with that, I'm going to stick with Dak Prescott.
From PD Dubs as well, he's got pick 1 full point PPR. Jason Witten, Jared Cook, or Greg Olsen. So we're once again back at the tight end toss-up here, Fensty. Jason Witten, old man Jason Witten continues to get a bunch of volume in the Cowboys offense. He has the matchup against Minnesota, which has actually been an area where teams have been able to exploit them this season. Meanwhile, we talked about Jared Cook getting touchdowns in his last 2 games, and of course Greg Olsen. The target share has just not been there the last few weeks, but maybe it comes back against Green Bay. I actually think this is a little bit tougher than most people would anticipate. I have my answer, but I'm curious to hear yours.
It would be Olsen if the targets were consistent, but it's not. So now I'm backtracking, and I'm really, I really want to chase Witten here. I really do. Again, just thinking that the targets will be there for him in this game against Minnesota, and I don't think he'll have a lot of people on him, too. I mean, I have him in a few leagues. I've stuck with Jason Witten, Ben. And again, with Greg Olsen, I can't have this whole 2 targets, 5 targets, 2 targets, 5 targets. So I'm going to stick with Jason Witten here.
All right, I think Jason Witten is my play as well. From our buddy Mark of the Buzz on Periscope, although he's not with the Buzz anymore. So, Mark, always good to hear you check in. Kirk Cousins versus Dallas or Matt Ryan versus the Saints. Not ideal matchups for either, but I must choose one. Listen, I think if you're going to take a chance here, Matt Ryan against the Saints, knowing that they're going to have to throw to have any sort of chance here. And the Saints defense is no joke. I think we all know that, but Falcons still have good wide receivers to throw to, and they still have a very solid tight end in Austin Hooper. So I would go Matt Ryan here and hope that it's another 300-yard game with multiple touchdowns, even if it's in garbage time. Kirk Cousins versus Dallas, we know about Kirk Cousins' struggles in primetime games. He's actually had better numbers from a fantasy perspective, Fensty, in primetime games, but they're not great numbers. And going up on the road, they made some really questionable decisions a couple weeks ago against Kansas City. So, I suppose that was last week. So I'd go with Matt Ryan here.
I'm sticking with it as well. If he's playing, he's healthy. Again, Matt Ryan wanted to play through the pain even when he wasn't. So, again, as much as I do like Kirk Cousins, and again, him and Diggs in a very good spot, I'm still actually going to go with Matt Ryan here. Multiple options. Austin Hooper, you just mentioned it as well, having a very strong year. And I'm loving this Atlanta-New Orleans game. I've been waiting all week for this.
I know. By the way, Mr. Sports Take says that I love Chris Herndon as a potential tight end star later this season when fully healthy. Listen, everybody was talking about Chris Herndon at the beginning of the year, and then, of course, the suspension came, and then the Sam Darnold injury, and then he missed more time. Do you look at him as somebody that could be a difference maker for the Jets moving forward?
Yes, I do. Him and Darnold had a very good rapport at the end of last year, Ben. And this is a situation we haven't even really talked about Giants-Jets yet because there are going to be some points in this game. These defenses stink.
Sneaky fantasy goodness game this week.
Right. I mean, we talk about going with guys like Michael Thomas for daily, but I mean, you look at the price points of guys like Golden Tate, Robbie Anderson, Jamison Crowder, who I really wish I was on last week at the Miami game. But you can even look at those options. And again, even Chris Herndon being there, very sneaky. And again, that report being there with Darnold healthy, this is a good game to test that.
I think so too. So I think, yeah, he's someone that you can look towards, especially with all the targets that Jamison Crowder gets in the middle of the field, Fensty. Like, to me, it almost feels like it makes plenty of sense to know that Chris Herndon likely is going to get a bunch of volume in that offense. Like, I don't think he's going to win you any leagues this year, but maybe, if you have a dynasty league and you want to go ahead and pick up Chris Herndon at his lowest point, maybe this is an ideal opportunity and a good spot for you.
Yep, and what you do is you lower your expectations a bit, especially if you've done what I've done. I never pay up for tight ends in fantasy, and with streaming, some years it works, some years it doesn't. Yes, when you picked up Will Dissly off the waiver wire, it was working. Boom, he gets hurt. Not as much to stream, and we talked about Jonnu Smith, been able to successfully stream him. At this point, you just have to lower your expectations. You can't have yourselves thinking that your tight end that you're streaming out of nowhere is going to get 10 plus points. But if they can hit that 8 to 10 point mark, Ben, I'm totally fine with that, especially during a big bye week.
No doubt about it. Let's continue to answer your questions. This is from Rock Out on YouTube. Amari Cooper and Zach Pascal, and it sounds like it's we got to pick between two flex. Well, it's a bit confusing. Let's see. Amari Cooper and Zach Pascal and Damian Williams and Tevin Coleman, 2 flex, pick 2 full point PPR. So it sounds like we got to choose between 2 of these 4 guys, all in the flex spots. So Amari Cooper, you got to have him in there, even though he's been dealing with a bit of a nagging injury. I think he's will play. He's been dealing
with injuries all year. But
I think he will play. So yes. I think you go ahead and lock him in. And then I think the real question is between Pascal, who's got the fantastic matchup against Miami, or Tevin Coleman in the Monday night game. Listen, I know Damian Williams had a fantastic game last week, and I know that he's been involved in the Kansas City Chiefs running game. And so from that standpoint, those are all reasons to trust Damian Williams. We've talked ad nauseum, Fensty, about how good Kansas City running backs in the passing game have been under Andy Reid over the last few years. But it could be Damian Williams this week. It could be LaShawn McCoy. We just don't know from a week-to-week basis who it's going to be. I'd trust Tevin Coleman more than Damian Williams, but a question is, in a full-point PPR, do you trust him or Zach Pascal more?
Man, again, I feel like I really want to go Pascal in this matchup. I really do. I'm going to have to be safe, though, inside with Coleman. Just think that there's a little bit more volume on his side. And
Seattle isn't stopping anybody this year.
Right. And as much as I want to rely on Zach Pascal, to me that's more of a daily dart throw, so I'm going to go with Coleman there.
Okay, very good. So we're going to go, in this case, rock out with Amari Cooper and Tevin Coleman. So good luck to you. From KC64134, Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston this week, and should I drop LaShawn McCoy? Man, both of those guys are in such good matchups. I know that Russell Wilson maybe is in a tougher matchup, but I trust him pretty much every week. If you're looking for the better matchup, though, it is Jameis Winston. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree, even though you know my thoughts on this guy. But again, I don't think you're in a bad spot either way. I think this is honestly a win-win for them both. But yes, the matchup does favor Winston a bit more against Arizona.
So, but I mean, do you still trust Jameis Winston? And listen, last week he was very, very good. Did not turn the ball over. Threw for over 300 yards, multiple touchdowns yet again. But could you ever tell yourself, I need to play Jameis Winston over Russell Wilson? Even in a tougher matchup, I don't think you can.
No, unless I can justify to myself, okay, I'm going to go with Winston here, which is I'm going to go take a risk with Winston, but you have to be okay. Expect 2 to 3 interceptions. Just do it. If you put yourself there and you could expect that and you could be fine with that and sleep better, then fine. Go with Jameis Winston there. I'm not one of those guys that really ever goes with Jameis Winston because of the ultimate roller coaster ride that he's put us through year after year, Ben.
Here's how I would break this down. I would say if you're playing season long, where interceptions could cost you a little bit more than, say, playing in daily, I would go Russell Wilson. In daily, though, I much prefer Jameis Winston because I know he's going to hit that 300-yard bonus. I know that the interceptions are only going to be -1 point. It's just such a good matchup that the upside I feel like is better for daily than it is for season long. So let's go Jameis Winston there.
If you can do the picks, then you're fine.
From our buddy Corey out in Winnipeg, he says, "Can I trust Kenyon Drake or put in Golden Tate from the Giants?" it's not a question of can you trust Kenyon Drake. It's just a bad matchup, Fensty. Tampa Bay's been so good against the run all season long. I much prefer Golden Tate going up against the Jets in the middle of the field where they've had all sorts of issues this year.
Right, and again, it's not only the matchup for Golden Tate, but it's the lack of availability. I mean, you have no Engram in this matchup. You have no Sterling Shepard in this matchup either. So again, the targets have been there. I mean, he's gotten targeted so much. I mean, last week, 6 targets, that's considered a dud for him. But since coming in, that's been the lowest amount of targets that he's gotten. So
he's been great.
And with again, we've been talking about David Johnson all hour and the impact he can make. That's going to eat into Drake a little bit. Golden Tate, he's wide open. I'm going to go with him here.
It's pretty remarkable to think that like Golden Tate, after the first 4 games of the suspension, he's really taken advantage of his opportunity with the Giants. I didn't particularly care for him coming into the season. I thought, well, Eli Manning was still going to start, and we're not sure when Daniel Jones was going to come in, but they had Evan Ingram, they had Sterling Shepard in the mix as well. We didn't really talk about the emergence of Darius Slayton, but and then Saquon Barkley was going to take a bunch of volume away in the middle of the field. So I just didn't love Golden Tate for this team, and he's been terrific over the last several weeks.
See, and I'm the opposite, and this is something that all of you can learn for next season if someone gets popped for a suspension for 4 games. Golden Tate at this point, from what I remember from drafts, was about a 10th, 11th round value.
The value was great. It was just a question of like if you wanted to chase a higher upside guy.
Well, yeah, and you do when you're talking about bench receivers that you're not paying for starters at this point. Then I was willing to do that, and the reason was because thinking back when Eli Manning was going to be the guy, you knew the Giants were going to have to throw a lot, and as soon as he came back, he was going to definitely help out in the slot. So with Golden Tate again, I've been on him. I have him in a few leagues, but yeah, it's not fun having to wait those 4 games.
From Michael on YouTube Live, he says, do I start Randall Cobb, Darius Slayton, or Auden Tate in the flex?
Man, Auden Tate questions, Ben.
Yeah, why does everybody loves Auden Tate?
Because we're chasing, it's bye weeks. I mean, I get the chasing. I mean, he's coming off from week 8, 13 targets.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of get it, but I don't get it at the same time. Because I don't know what to expect to see from Finley.
I think, well, I'm playing Slayton in this matchup against the Jets. Jets haven't been able to stop anybody all year. Slayton, I think, top 3 in the NFL in air yards in games that he's played so far this year. I think he's in a fantastic spot this week.
When it comes to debating against players against the Jets moving forward, Ben, we just have to go back to think of what we said last week, touting Devontae Parker and
That's right.
Williams.
That's right, baby. Go ahead and line them up. Jets, Giants, man. Go ahead and just do a full-on game stack in your daily lineups this week, and just go nuts and try not to bang your head against the wall. From MathQuest. It's some equivalent of MathQuest, but there's some numbers instead of letters. I never played MathQuest. I played Number Munchers.
MapQuest.
Oh, MapQuest, like the thing before Google Maps that you'd have to...
Right before navigations. It was all about MapQuest.
I feel like I would have invested in MapQuest and then, didn't realize that Google was going to come in and just completely just shut them out.
Well, that's
bad job
Google.
by me.
That's what they do.
But he wants to know whether or not he should start Matt Ryan or Aaron Rodgers today. Rodgers is at home against Carolina. The Packers are coming off an atrocious performance against the Chargers on the road. Really threw much of us off guard. I ended up betting the Chargers in that game, Fensty, but primarily it was just because it was weird to see everybody on the Packers that I kind of felt maybe Vegas knew something that I didn't, kind of in this Buffalo and Cleveland game. I think if you're looking for, volume and opportunity, Matt Ryan is still the higher upside play because he's going to have to chuck it around. But I'm certainly intrigued by Aaron Rodgers, and he'll have low ownership today. But Carolina's been top 5 DVOA versus the pass. I think I prefer Matt Ryan.
Yeah, again, I mean, you would think about it overall that I would say a little bit more of a safety play is Rodgers. But again, I've been all in on this Atlanta-New Orleans game. I think it's going to be high scoring, and I think he's going to have to throw. I'm not even worried about the health of Ryan.
What about from Rockout? Do you go with Jared Goff on the road at Pittsburgh or Josh Allen on the road at Cleveland? Jared Goff coming off the bye, and we've also talked about his struggles over the course of this season, but maybe Pittsburgh eventually forces a shootout out of there. We certainly don't know what the running game is going to look like, but Brandon Cooks is out. He's still continuing to miss time with that concussion versus Josh Allen, who continues to give you a fairly safe floor. Goff is always going to be the higher upside guy, but Josh Allen certainly gives you a better floor, and I probably prefer him this week.
Yeah, I mean, against Cleveland as well, I like the matchup a little bit better for Josh Allen as well.
Okay. Continuing on, we got about 4 minutes left to answer your guys' questions. Mr. Sportssteak says this has been a Jonnu Smith hype show. Well, you know what? He's good. He's good, and he's in a good matchup, and I feel like that's an opportunity for Tannehill and the Titans to take advantage of.
We're not telling you to build your lineups around him, but it's.
I am. I'm saying start at Jonnu Smith and work your way around it. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. From RAG Evolution, do I start Tevin Coleman or Kenny Golladay in the flex? Of course, Kenny Golladay does not have his typical starting quarterback in Matthew Stafford. I don't know whether that means that's an indication that he might get targeted more, but in shorter volume. I prefer Tevin Coleman this week against Seattle. I think that's the easier play. I just don't know what to expect without Stafford and Golladay together.
You make total sense, Ben. As much as I really don't want to say it, let's be safe.
From Yuri, it's either Yuri Craptastic or Uric Raptastic. These names coming in from Periscope and YouTube Live are always the best.
Are they saying we're craptastic?
No, it's there's an I in there. So
I'm sorry, you just said to me you're craptastic. Am I craptastic, Ben?
You're great. You're nothing along the lines. It says you're I craptastic.
We might be in a fight. I might have to fly out to Kansas City.
Or Eureka Petastic. Anyway, you know who you are if you submitted your question in. Does he go with Jarvis Landry, Sammy Watkins, or Tyler Boyd? Sammy Watkins is on the road against Tennessee today. Tyler Boyd, of course, at home against Baltimore. Jarvis Landry at home against the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Bills are very good against the pass. But Jarvis Landry continues to get upwards of, I think he had 13 targets last week, ended up with a touchdown. He's seen more volume, although Baker Mayfield Fensty has also made a point of saying we need to force feed Odell Beckham Jr. the ball, and it's also a matchup where they should be running a ton of Nick Chubb and also a bit of Kareem Hunt in the mix as well. Sammy Watkins has a very good matchup against Tennessee, and Tyler Boyd's going to get a bunch of volume in this offense as well. This is a tough one for me. I think if you did gun to my head and tried to determine where I would go, I think I kind of like Sammy Watkins as more of a tournament play and a guy that I think I slightly prefer over Jarvis Landry and Tyler Boyd this week.
Yep, and again, Hardman has not been a factor at all since earlier in the season, so there's I'm not worried about that as well. Even Hill's going to get double covered, so he'll still be able to produce too, pun intended. I'm gonna stick with you and go Watkins as much as I do like Boyd here for the target volume. I'm going to go with Watkins here as well, Ben.
Last 2 weeks for Sammy Watkins, he's seen 18 targets and 12 catches for 45 yards and 63 yards in the process, averaging 9 yards per reception. So he's seeing volume in the Kansas City offense. That was with Matt Moore. Now, all of a sudden, Pat Mahomes comes back. All of a sudden, he might be able to connect with him for a deep pass against a struggling Tennessee secondary. From I think it's Tyorte A on Periscope. Thoughts on Latavius Murray's workload today? That's a really good question because the last couple of weeks, Murray has been awesome. We talked about him going over 100 yards both times, 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games. So I feel like in this matchup against Atlanta, he's probably going to see a little bit more volume than he has with Alvin Kamara starting. Then again, we haven't seen Murray get the volume that he needs to be a standalone player in this particular spot. So where do you go with this one? Do you feel like Latavius Murray is worthy of maybe even a flex spot start today?
If you can deal with, and I'm going to just, doing this all in my head, if you can deal with 13 to 15 carries, then I'm fine with that. Yardage, I'm not sure about. But if that's,
has he given you that at any point this year with Alvin Kamara starting? And the answer is no. It's been single-digit carries.
Right, and the reports are out that they're going to start sharing the workload, and Kamara's fine with it and all, but we can't really take those seriously just then. Kamara's going to be getting the priority.
If you believe the Saints get off to a massive lead and they give plenty of volume to Latavius, then it's an ideal spot. But, since the beginning of this year, 6, 5, 2, 4, 7, 8 carries, no double-digit rushing attempts, and nothing really substantial from his fantasy scores. He had 12.7 against Houston, but that's because he got into the end zone on one of them. So it's hard to rely on. I have a hard time going up against it. I feel like he's not a play for me. But if they end up splitting carries, then yeah, you get to take advantage. I don't like him on DraftKings this week because he's 7,300 for a backup running back. So I don't think it makes a lot of sense to play him.
Do you think, Ben, with the Saints now being healthier, do you think that will take away? Because I'm sure people are staring at, when it comes to Murray, staring at the targets as well, for the receptions, rather. Do you think that Cook being there takes some of those targets away from Murray?
Yeah, I think it does.
Me
just
too.
because Breeze will go to the tight end in the middle of the field. I don't think he has any issue trying to take Jared Cook deep or trying to approach him for a 6-yard in route. So it's just hard to get excited about Latavius Murray today. I mean, if you're an Alvin Kamara owner, you need to make sure you own him down the stretch. And Fensty, we should talk about this very briefly. The idea that with somebody like Alexander Mattison and Latavius Murray, that this is an ideal time, as ideal as we've ever talked about, to load up on your handcuffs. You have to at this point, especially with the playoffs right around the corner, knowing that we've already seen a clear-cut example of what happens when one of these guys goes down, that the handcuff can immediately step in and be great.
This goes back to your draft plan as well. Any running back that you target and you end up getting, and yes, some RB2s are going to be more expensive. You might even be paying close to starter's price. Not necessarily that you have to start them, but moving forward, and I got to give credit to my guy Jeff Mans here from Elite Fantasy. Yeah. He's been all over this for not only this year and last year where everyone's all of a sudden picked up, but he's been on it forever. Handcuffing and the importance of handcuffing. And everyone's like, oh, but it's a waste of a roster spot. It's not. The roulette wheel of fantasy football, it can land on you. It landed on Saquon Barkley owners at one point this year.
Right.
It can land on you. You must always handcuff. And I'll be honest, Ben, because the handcuffing phenomenon has become so big, people are actually starting to spend up for those RB2s by themselves. So you're going to have to make sure when you go into your draft plan and you get your targeted running backs in the early rounds that you're spending that 9th, 10th, 11th round pick just to make sure you handcuff yourself.
No doubt about it. And again, one of the guys that we talked about today, Kareem Hunt. If you're a Nick Chubb owner and you don't have Kareem Hunt on your roster and you haven't made an attempt to go ahead and get him, do it before whatever happens today. And let's say he doesn't have a good game. Let's say he gets 5 rushing attempts for 10 yards. Even better. But make sure that if Nick Chubb goes down, you are prepared to have Kareem Hunt ready to go to step up the rest of the way. A couple more questions coming in, Fensty, before we wrap things up. From Trey on YouTube Live. It says, morning, fellas. 2 questions. Do I go with Jameis Winston and a potential stroke, or Matt Ryan? He said Seamus Winston, so I totally get that there. I think that's also a perfectly reasonable. Listen, both of those guys could potentially give you a stroke today. Or Marvin Jones without Stafford or Sammy Watkins, full point PPR. We're going Sammy Watkins there. Yep. We both like the matchup for him. I don't think you can trust Marvin Jones with Jeff Driscoll. And then Jameis Winston and dealing with the Baker's dozen or Matt Ryan against the Saints. I think I got to go Jameis here. I think Jameis against Arizona at home is what you got to do.
Yep, I'm with you there. I like them both very much today. But again, like we've been talking about, you could deal with the possibility of 2 to 3 picks. Then I'm fine with it if you're comfortable with it.
And then last one coming in from Sergio on YouTube. Do you go with Golden Tate or Christian Kirk as the wide receiver 3 in a standard league? Not PPR, Fensty, but a standard league.
Man, see, that takes me out of Tate a little bit now.
Right, I agree.
Makes you want to go with Kirk a little bit more, Ben.
I think Kirk probably has the higher opportunity for touchdowns in this game. So
right.
Christian Kirk. By the way, from our buddy Craptastic, he says, thanks for the advice. I pronounce it Yori Craptastic.
Okay.
So now we know. It wasn't you, it wasn't me. It was Yori Craptastic.
Okay, we just have to make sure here. We're a respectful show.
We're good. It's a very respectful show. All right, before we say goodbye, tell me what's going on with the FF Pie Bet with Fantasy Alarm this week.
So every week you have the opportunities, pies for charity. You take a pie to the face if you lose to the Fantasy Alarm show on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio, weekdays 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern. You could tag at Fantasy Alarm, at SiriusXM Fantasy, at RotoBuzz Guy for Howard Bender, who is the pie master. And what it is you're facing us in a wide receiver challenge, full point PPR. We have a draft on the show every Friday, so there are 4 wide receivers who are off the board, and you can go on Twitter at SiriusXM Fantasy and find out not only all 4, but who everybody else is taking, because you can take the wide receiver that we haven't taken. There are 4 that are off the board, but if 35 people are on one wide receiver, that's fine. However, in a full point PPR, if you lose against us, you tweet your entry, you lose, we're expecting, and we'll chase you down, for you to pie yourself in the face or someone else to pie you in the face on social media, hashtag FFPieBet. It's a great cause. It's for charity and pieing in the face. Come on, how funny is that, Ben? How
it's
funny
hysterical.
Will it be when at Benny Heis getting pied in the face one of these weeks?
I mean, listen, I submitted a pick last week. I was able to stay alive, right?
You were.
So, do you know off the top of your head, I'm trying to go to the SiriusXM Fantasy Twitter page to see which ones have been taken off the board. Do we know what wide receivers are available?
So, I mean, the whole field is outside of Michael Thomas is off the board. Devontae Adams is also off the board as well.
Okay.
So, and then off the top of my head, I want to say I think Tyreek Hill is also off the board, and I'll have to go and see who that final wide receiver is. But right now, those three you cannot take if you're in the FF Pie bet.
Okay, so Michael Thomas, no Devontae Adams, no Tyreek Hill. Ooh, Michael Thomas would have been the clear-cut pick for me. Who did you go with?
I had Michael Thomas. I had the first overall pick.
That's
week,
the
and I
way
went
to
with
go.
Michael Thomas.
You know what? Let's go 2 weeks in a row. Let's go to the God himself. Chris Godwin will be my pick. I am submitting it right here on Wake and Rake with Heis Fensty.
You can't. He's off.
Oh, it's it. Godwin was the final guy?
It's actually Godwin and Evans are both off the board here.
Okay, so Evans and Godwin, Michael Thomas, and then is it Devontae Adams or Tyreek Hill?
It's Devontae Adams.
Devontae Adams. Go ahead and lock me in for... Should I go off the board a little bit, Fensty? Should I go ahead and take a bit of a risk to try and potentially get an attempt for a pie in the face?
Listen, if you might get a pie in the face here. Let's hear it.
I'm thinking about Allen Robinson.
Oh, wow.
I'm thinking about it. I think he can't not get targeted. You know what? For the good of Bears
receiver, Ben.
What's that? What was that?
Go with the Lions receiver, Ben.
I can't do that.
You can.
No.
Come on.
No. I think it's a bold move going with Allen Robinson against that competition.
Right. You know what? That is bold. And I'll tell you what's bold. Ani Sridhar, who is one of the producers here on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio, he volunteered to pick fourth Benny Heis. And he went with Devontae Adams. He volunteered. He's so confident in himself, he decided to grab that fourth pick.
Yeah. Give me Allen Robinson this week. Let's roll the dice a little bit. I think Mitchell Trubisky has a better game. I think he's turned off all the televisions inside Hallis Hall. There you go. Allen Robinson, my pick to you live on the air. Hashtag FFPieBet at Fantasy Alarm at RotoBuzzGuy. Howard, you ignored my tweet last week, my friend. I am here. I am putting out Allen Robinson. I am daring myself to get pied in the face, all to help out a great cause.
Absolutely. And again, the Pie Master has a lot of work because he's getting all of you ready for your fantasy football week. So, Ben, don't take that personally or anything like that.
No, we love Howard.
Craptastic a few times on this show today, Ben. Again,
no, we
getting a knock on your door later today.
No, we love Howard. That's our guy. So, for Fensty, where can people find your work? Because Wake Up Fantasy Sports is not something that we'll be able to wake up to. Instead, we'll be able to lounge and hang with Fensty maybe during the afternoons.
Maybe, Ben, we'll have to wait and see. But follow me at Fensty Sports. You'll be getting updates throughout in the next couple of weeks on where you can hear me. But you can also find me at fantasyalarm.com as well, helping out, especially with that DFS basketball side starting fives, season-long rankings. They come out every single Monday, injury charts as well, and waiver options. Always helping you. And don't forget our Fantasy Alarm chats, too, for season-long and DFS NBA. I'm all in there, and I want to help you dominate.
He's the best in the business. He's Justin Fenster. Make sure you guys are following him on Twitter at Fensty Sports. Me, you can follow at Benny Heis. Thank you guys, as always, for participating, for sending in your questions, for hanging with us this Sunday morning. We will be back next week for the Week 11 edition of Wake and Rake. For Fensty, I'm Ben. Talk to you guys soon. Be good.
Good luck.